Outlaw or 1% motorcycle gangs have plagued the federal government since the 1960s. Today, powerful motorcycle clubs, MCs, operate on both coasts and run drugs across the Canadian and Mexican borders. Despite America's romanticized view of biker culture, fueled by books like Hunter S. Thompson's Hell's Angels and shows like Sons of Anarchy, these clubs remain significant players in organized crime. Recent years have seen major busts involving drug trafficking, racketeering, and contract killings. Former ATF agent Jay Dobbins' 2009 book, No Angel, My Harrowing Undercover Journey to the Inner Circle of the Hells Angels, sheds light on his dangers, including club harassment. Outlaw motorcycle gangs are still active in the US, and the federal government relentlessly combats their influence.
I'm still the president, not him.
Number 1, Hells Angels. Founded in 1948 in Fontana, California, the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club is arguably the most infamous outlaw biker gang in the world. Their notorious winged death's head logo is synonymous with a lifestyle outside the law. The Hells Angels have a deep-rooted history of criminal activities, ranging from drug trafficking and extortion to brutal violent crimes. What sets them apart is their expansive global influence, with chapters in numerous countries across North America, Europe, and beyond. Their notorious reputation is compounded by a strict code of loyalty and brotherhood, making it incredibly challenging for law enforcement agencies to infiltrate their ranks. This tight-knit structure has allowed them to operate with a significant degree of secrecy, further complicating investigative efforts. Throughout their existence, the Hells Angels have been embroiled in numerous violent confrontations with rival gangs such as the Outlaws and the Mongols. These clashes often make headlines and contribute to their fearsome reputation. Yet, paradoxically, the Hells Angels also engage in charity events and community service, adding a layer of complexity to their public image. For example, they have been known to organize toy drives for children during the holiday season and participate in fundraising rides for various causes. These acts of goodwill stand in stark contrast to their criminal undertakings, creating a dual image that leaves the public contemplating the true nature of this infamous motorcycle club. Number 2. The Outlaws. Established in 1935 in McCook, Illinois, the Outlaws Motorcycle Club is one of America's oldest and most dangerous biker gangs. Known for their intense rivalry with the Hells Angels, the Outlaws have been involved in numerous violent confrontations over the years. Their criminal activities span drug trafficking, extortion, and murder, painting them as one of the most ruthless gangs. The club's motto, God forgives, outlaws don't, perfectly encapsulates their fearsome reputation. The Outlaws have a significant presence in both the Midwest and the East Coast of the United States, and they have expanded globally with chapters in several countries. Their black and white skull logo, often referred to as Charlie, is a well-known emblem in the biker world, symbolizing both fear and respect. Law enforcement agencies have undertaken numerous operations to dismantle the Outlaws, but their tight-knit structure and unyielding code of silence have made these efforts exceedingly difficult. The Outlaws' activities often include violent turf wars with rival gangs, and their commitment to secrecy makes infiltration by authorities a daunting task. Despite ongoing efforts to curb their influence, the Outlaws Motorcycle Club continues to be a formidable force in the world of outlaw biker gangs. Number 3. The Bandidos. Formed in 1966 in San Leon, Texas, the Bandidos Motorcycle Club stands as one of the largest and most dangerous outlaw biker gangs globally. Known for their provocative motto, "We are the people our parents warned us about," the Bandidos have earned a reputation for extreme violence and criminal activities, including drug trafficking, extortion, and murder. Their fierce rivalry with the Hells Angels has sparked numerous violent clashes, further solidifying their notorious image. The Bandidos' distinctive red and gold colors and their emblematic fat Mexican logo are iconic symbols within the biker community. These identifiers command both fear and respect, seamlessly intertwining with their violent reputation. The club's reach extends far beyond the United States, with chapters established in multiple countries, giving them a significant global presence and influence. Law enforcement agencies have made persistent efforts to curtail the Bandidos' activities, but the gang's cohesive structure and loyalty among members have thwarted many of these attempts. Their operations are shrouded in secrecy, making infiltration and dismantling by authorities a complex and dangerous endeavor. Number 4. The Pagans. Founded in 1959 in Prince George's County, Maryland, the Pagans Motorcycle Club has established itself as a formidable force primarily based on the East Coast of the United States. Infamous for their involvement in drug trafficking, weapons smuggling, and various violent crimes, the Pagans have garnered a reputation for brutality and ruthlessness. Their logo, featuring the Norse fire giant Surtur, aptly symbolizes their fierce and fiery nature. The Pagans maintain an intense rivalry with several other motorcycle gangs, particularly the Hells Angels, leading to numerous violent confrontations over the years. These clashes only serve to heighten their fearsome reputation within the outlaw biker community. The Pagans operate under a strict code of secrecy and loyalty, making infiltration by law enforcement exceedingly difficult. This tight-knit structure has allowed them to maintain a robust presence, despite numerous efforts by authorities to dismantle the organization. Their code ensures that members remain united and loyal, which significantly complicates legal proceedings and criminal investigations. Involved deeply in organized crime, the Pagans are one of the most dangerous and influential biker gangs in America. Their activities and internal solidarity make them a persistent and formidable challenge for law enforcement agencies. Number 5. The Warlocks. Established in the 1960s in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the Warlocks Motorcycle Club has carved out a notorious reputation for brutality. Engaging in drug trafficking, weapons smuggling, and a range of violent crimes, the Warlocks are infamous for their extreme violence, which has included assaults on rival gang leaders and even police officers. Their logo, depicting a winged harpy, embodies their fierce and predatory nature. The Warlocks have established a significant presence, particularly along the East Coast and in the southern United States. Their activities and influence span various regions, making them a substantial force in the outlaw biker community. Despite persistent efforts by law enforcement to curtail their activities, the Warlocks have consistently managed to evade substantial infiltration and dismantlement. A cornerstone of the Warlocks' resilience is their strict code of loyalty and secrecy. This stringent internal structure complicates efforts by authorities to penetrate their ranks, resulting in a durable and tightly knit organization. Membership in the Warlocks comes with an expectation of unwavering loyalty, which further solidifies their capacity to operate outside the law. Even in the face of continuous legal pressure and targeted operations by law enforcement, the Warlocks Motorcycle Club remains a formidable and enduring entity in the realm of outlaw motorcycle gangs, with their influence and infamy undiminished over the decades. Number 6. The Mongols. Founded in 1969 in Montebello, California, the Mongols Motorcycle Club has earned a fearsome reputation, particularly for its violent clashes with the Hells Angels. Engaged in a wide range of criminal activities, including drug trafficking, extortion, and various violent crimes, the Mongols are known for their brutality and ruthless conduct. Their logo, featuring a caricature of Genghis Khan, symbolizes their fierce and warrior-like nature, reflecting their aggressive and combative spirit. The Mongols have established a considerable presence in the southwestern United States, particularly in California, and have expanded their reach internationally with chapters in multiple countries. Their influence extends across borders, making them a significant player on the global stage of outlaw motorcycle clubs. Law enforcement agencies have made continuous efforts to dismantle the Mongols, often targeting their leadership and operational structures. However, these efforts have been largely thwarted by the club's strict code of loyalty and brotherhood. This unwavering internal solidarity makes infiltrating the Mongols incredibly difficult for authorities, as members are highly committed to protecting the club's secrets and operations. Number 7. The Sons of Silence. Founded in 1966 in Newitt, Colorado, the Sons of Silence Motorcycle Club has carved out a notorious reputation for its involvement in drug trafficking and violent crimes. With a strong presence throughout the Midwest, the Sons of Silence are considered one of the most dangerous biker gangs in America. Their iconic logo, featuring an American eagle superimposed over the letter A, symbolizes their patriotism and fierce independence, which are central to their identity. The Sons of Silence are known for their extreme violence, often engaging in brutal confrontations with rival gangs. These violent clashes have only amplified their fearsome reputation within the outlaw biker community. Their criminal activities are extensive, including not only drug trafficking, but also other illicit enterprises that bring them into frequent conflict with law enforcement. The gang's strict code of loyalty and tight-knit structure make it challenging for law enforcement to infiltrate their ranks, providing the club with an additional layer of protection against external threats. Law enforcement officials continue to target their operations, but the Sons of Silence maintain a significant and intimidating presence in the world of outlaw motorcycle clubs. Number 8. The Vagos. Established in the 1960s in San Bernardino, California, the Vagos Motorcycle Club has cemented itself as a formidable presence in the world of outlaw motorcycle gangs. Engaged in a variety of criminal activities such as drug trafficking, weapons smuggling, and violent crimes, the Vagos have earned a reputation for their brutality and ruthless operations. The club's distinctive green and black colors, along with their logo featuring Loki, the Norse god of mischief, symbolize their cunning and rebellious nature. The Vagos maintain a strong presence in the southwestern United States, particularly in California, Arizona, and Nevada. And they have also expanded their reach internationally, establishing chapters in multiple countries. This expansion has increased their influence and established them as a significant entity on the global stage. Their rivalry with other notorious biker gangs, especially the Hells Angels, has resulted in numerous violent confrontations, further enhancing their fearsome reputation. These clashes often escalate to dangerous levels, drawing significant attention from both the public and law enforcement. Number 9. The Highwaymen. Based in Detroit, Michigan, the Highwaymen Motorcycle Club was founded in the 1950s and has grown to establish a formidable reputation in the outlaw biker world. Despite being smaller in size compared to some other notorious gangs, the Highwaymen have consistently been involved in a range of criminal activities, including drug trafficking, extortion, and violent crimes. Their distinctive logo, which features a winged skeleton wearing a motorcycle cap, symbolizes their rebellious spirit and dangerous nature. The Highwaymen dominate the Midwest, boasting a significant presence, particularly in Michigan and surrounding states. Their influence extends beyond their numbers, as they have been involved in numerous violent confrontations with rival gangs, adding to their fearsome reputation. These conflicts often escalate into high-profile incidents that draw significant attention from both the media and law enforcement. Despite persistent efforts by law enforcement to curb their illegal activities, the Highwaymen have proven to be resilient. Their tight-knit structure and strict code of loyalty make it challenging for authorities to penetrate and dismantle the organization. This steadfast cohesion allows the club to maintain its operations and influence despite ongoing legal pressures. Number 10. The Black Pistons. The Black Pistons Motorcycle Club serves as an influential support club for the notorious Outlaws Motorcycle Club. Founded in the early 2000s, the Black Pistons have swiftly made a name for themselves through involvement in drug trafficking, extortion, and violent crimes. Acting often as enforcers for the Outlaws, their reputation for brutality is well earned and feared within the biker community. Their distinctive logo, featuring a skull with crossed pistons, symbolizes their fierce and mechanized approach to their operations. Despite being a relatively new player in the outlaw motorcycle club scene, the Black Pistons have rapidly established themselves as a formidable and dangerous force. They maintain a strong presence not only in the United States, but also in various countries, effectively broadening their influence and operational scope. The Black Pistons' strict code of loyalty and secrecy has proven to be a significant barrier for law enforcement. Infiltrating their ranks is a challenging endeavor, making it difficult for authorities to gather actionable intelligence or dismantle their networks. This tight-knit structure ensures that the club remains resilient against external threats and persists in its illicit activities. Their affiliation with the Outlaws amplifies their threat level, as they are often tasked with executing the more violent and risky undertakings. April 27, 1974. 3 Hells Angels found in Florida, executed, beheaded. The Outlaws sent a message. The war still rages today. This is America's oldest outlaw motorcycle gang. Birth of an empire. Matilda's Bar stood on Route 66 in McCook, Illinois, a working-class joint where electromotive company workers drank after shifts. In 1935, John Davis gathered friends at that bar. They formed the McCook Outlaws Motorcycle Club. Nobody knew they'd created the oldest outlaw biker club in the world. World War II put the club on hold. Members shipped overseas. Those who returned came back different, harder, more violent. May 1946. The Outlaws attended the first post-war motorcycle rally at Soldier Field in Chicago. Veterans who'd seen combat. Men who didn't fit civilian life anymore. By 1950, the club exploded. Members from across Chicago joined. The McCook Outlaws became the Chicago Outlaws. South Side headquarters. They redesigned their logo. A small skull replaced the winged motorcycle. 1954 brought crossed pistons below the skull. They called it Charlie. That symbol would become one of the most feared in America. 1963 changed everything. The Outlaws became the first certified one-percenter club east of the Mississippi. The term came from the American Motorcyclist Association, which claimed 99% of motorcyclists were law-abiding. The remaining 1%? Outlaws. The club wore that label with pride. They added a diamond patch to their vests. 1%er inscribed inside. July 1964. Multiple clubs merged under the Outlaws banner. The Gypsy Outlaws from Milwaukee, the Gypsy Outlaws from Louisville, the Cult from New York. They became the largest one-percenter club east of the Mississippi. January 1st, 1965. Official incorporation, the American Outlaws Association was born, a criminal enterprise disguised as a motorcycle club. They added a middle finger patch mocking the AMA logo. Ultimate Rebellion. 1967 brought Florida expansion. They absorbed the Iron Cross Club in West Palm Beach. The Outlaws now stretched from Midwest to South. 1969 gave them their identity. Someone coined the motto, God forgives, outlaws don't. 4 words that defined everything. The club enforced strict rules. White males over 21 only. American-made motorcycles. At least 750 cubic centimeters, no exceptions. Black and white colors, skull imagery, death's head symbols. Members who killed for the club earned twin lightning bolt tattoos. SS-style symbols celebrating murder. The Outlaws weren't motorcycle enthusiasts. They were a criminal organization. The Blood Rivalry. December 31st, 1973. New Year's Eve. The Hells Angels clubhouse in New York City. 3 outlaws from Florida showed up. Accounts vary, but violence erupted. Some claim sexual assault. Others describe escalating threats. The Hells Angels tracked those 3 outlaws back to Florida. They wanted revenge. April 27th, 1974. Fort Lauderdale. 3 Massachusetts Hells Angels lured their targets to a construction site. Execution style. Shot in the back of the head. Beheaded. Bodies dumped in a gravel pit. The Outlaws didn't hide it. They advertised it. Florida belonged to them. The Hells Angels declared war. Not temporary, not local. Total war between the world's 2 largest motorcycle clubs. June 9th, 1974. Akron, Ohio. 3 Hells Angels opened fire with submachine guns and shotguns. They targeted Outlaws member Stephen Wargo. Wrong house. Civilian Donald De La Sera died instead. Collateral damage in a war consuming both clubs. January 7th, 1975. Cleveland. A suitcase bomb exploded in a home. 3 dead, including a 2-year-old boy. 3 more critically injured, including a 9-month-old. The Hells Angels thought an Outlaws member lived there. Wrong intelligence. Dead children. Between 1974 and 1982, at least 20 homicides connected to this war. The real number was much higher. 1977 brought international expansion. Satan's Choice chapters in Canada patched over to the Outlaws. Cross-border drug routes opened. The first biker war erupted in Canada from 1977 to 1984. 20 to 30 murders by 1980. Another 42 between 1981 and 1984. March 21, 1978. Gilles Cadaret, Outlaws Montreal president, started his car. The bomb underneath exploded instantly. He died on Bordeaux Street. April 25, 1978. 2 Hells Angels entered the Outlaws clubhouse and opened fire. Multiple wounded. The next day, Outlaws member Athanase Markopoulos was murdered by two Hells Angels. The violence consumed entire regions. The Wild Ones motorcycle club in Hamilton got caught in the crossfire. They associated with Hells Angels. The Outlaws killed them systematically. Dennis Stewart, bomb in his car, dead. Danny Powell, another bomb, lost his leg. 5 Wild Ones killed before the club disbanded. By the mid-1980s, over 100 people dead. The Hells Angels won Canada. The Outlaws retreated to Ontario. But the rivalry never ended. Both clubs expanded globally. The Outlaws established chapters in France, 1993, Australia, 1994, Norway, 1995. They spread across Europe, Belgium, England, Germany, Ireland, Russia, Spain. November 2006. The Outlaws opened the first major outlaw club chapter in the Far East. Okinawa City, Japan. 43 countries, 441 chapters, over 5,000 members. Second largest outlaw club worldwide. New acronyms emerged. Adios, Angels Die in Outlaw States. Ahammed, All Hells, Angels Must Die. The war raged on every continent. Criminal Empire. The Outlaws evolved into a sophisticated criminal organization. They built an empire on violence, drugs, and intimidation. The structure mirrored organized crime. International president controlled everything. Regional presidents reported to him. Chapter presidents reported to regional leaders. Clear chain of command. Members paid $1,200 annually. They attended mandatory weekly meetings. They participated in runs constantly. Communication, coordination. The Outlaws operated like a corporation, a violent, criminal corporation. Drug trafficking formed the foundation. The Outlaws produced, transported, and distributed methamphetamine nationwide. They moved cocaine from South America through Florida and Texas. They trafficked marijuana in massive quantities. The club controlled distribution networks spanning multiple states. Authorities estimated hundreds of millions annually. Some estimates reached over $1 billion. The Outlaws ran prostitution rings. They controlled strippers and escort agencies. Women were property literally. Old ladies wore vests reading "Property of the Outlaws." Weapons trafficking. They sold illegal firearms. They smuggled guns across borders. They provided weapons to other criminal organizations. Money laundering clean drug profits. The Outlaws owned legitimate businesses. Motorcycle shops, t-shirt stores, bars, tattoo parlors. They funneled cash through these fronts. Extortion and intimidation brought additional income. Bar owners paid protection money. Strip club owners paid tribute. Refuse meant fire bombings. Illegal gambling operations, sports betting, card games, underground casinos in multiple cities, insurance fraud, staged accidents, inflated claims, systematic defrauding, motorcycle and parts theft. They stole bikes, chopped them, sold components through repair shops, moved stolen motorcycles across state lines. Arson. They burned rival clubhouses. They destroyed businesses that refused to pay. Contract killing. Need someone dead? The Outlaws handled it, for the right price. The Department of Justice designated the Outlaws as one of the Big Four outlaw gangs, along with Hells Angels, Bandidos, and Pagans. These four posed a serious national domestic threat. The FBI estimated outlaw clubs collected $1 billion in illegal income annually. The Outlaws controlled a significant portion, but the empire needed enforcement. Someone ruthless enough to maintain control through fear. Enter Harry Taco Bowman. The Taco Reign. Harry Joseph Bowman got his nickname from his dark complexion. He looked Hispanic. Club members called him Taco. Born July 17, 1949, in Michigan. Working-class kid. Graduated Port Huron Catholic High School. Former schoolmates remembered him as quite friendly, an all-right kid. Nothing suggested he'd become one of America's most notorious criminals. Bowman joined the Outlaws and became Detroit chapter president in 1970. 21 years old, running a criminal organization. Harold Henderson, the Dayton-based national president, mentored him. Taught him drugs, violence, power, control. Bowman became national vice president in the late 1970s. He was being groomed. In 1984, Bowman became international president, 35 years old. For 15 years, Harry Taco Bowman ruled the Outlaws with absolute authority. He transformed them from regional gang into global criminal empire. Bowman kept a low profile publicly. Lived in Grosse Pointe Farms with his wife and daughters. Nice house. Private schools, bulletproof Cadillac, looked like a businessman. Behind the scenes, he ordered murders, firebombings, beatings, kidnappings, extortion. He built a machine generating hundreds of millions in drug profits. Detective Philip Reich described Bowman as a very interesting, bright guy. I can't say I admired what he did for a living, but I admired his leadership abilities. Bowman ran legitimate business fronts, motorcycle repair facility, t-shirt shop. Shirts featured pistols pointing at Detroit's Renaissance Center. Visit Detroit, Murder City. But Bowman's leadership relied on extreme violence. He enforced discipline through terror. March 1992. Daytona Bike Week. Former probate Erwin Nissen fought with Atlanta. Chapter President James McClain. Bad move. Bowman summoned Nissen. Others locked his motorcycle so he couldn't escape. Next morning, they brought Nissen to Bowman's motel. Bowman punched him in the face, put a knife to his ear, threatened to kill him. On Bowman's orders, others beat and kicked Nissen. Then Bowman said, "Get rid of him." They pushed Nissen off a 3-story balcony. Broken bones, severe injuries. A message? Never challenge leadership. Bowman ordered multiple murders. The 1991 killing of Raymond Chaffin from the Warlocks. Bombings of rival clubhouses. Systematic violence against Hells Angels and Pagans. His motto? Snitches are a dying breed. The FBI estimated Bowman controlled 64 U.S. chapters and chapters in 8 other countries during his presidency. But empires built on violence collapse. The fall August 1997. Federal prosecutors unsealed a massive indictment. Bowman faced racketeering, murder conspiracy, drug trafficking, weapons violations. The indictment detailed his 20-year reign. It exposed the criminal enterprise. He ran. March 14, 1998. The FBI added Bowman to the 10 most wanted list. The 453rd person ever. $50,000 reward. His face appeared in post offices nationwide. America's Most Wanted profiled him. For 15 months, Bowman evaded capture. The Detroit and Chicago mobs helped hide him. June 7, 1999. FBI agents surrounded a home in Sterling Heights, Michigan. Bowman was inside with his family. The run ended. April 2001. Tampa, Florida. The trial began. At least 16 U.S. Marshals in the courtroom constantly. Armed motorcades. Daily bomb sweeps. The Outlaws' reputation terrified authorities. Prosecutors presented 22 Outlaws members. 56 counts. Drug crimes, gun violations, arson, robbery, extortion, kidnapping, murder. But Bowman's trial was the centerpiece. 10 racketeering counts. The case hinged on testimony from former Outlaws. Bowman's enforcer Wayne Joe Black Hicks flipped. He'd overseen Florida operations. Now he testified against his leader. Other witnesses came from prison cells. Men who'd made deals, drug dealers, rapists, hit men. They described throwing outlaws from balconies, raping women, bombing clubhouses, massive drug operations. The defense argued Bowman was simply a motorcycle club leader, victim of rogue members. The jury didn't buy it. April 17, 2001. Guilty on 8 counts, 4 RICO violations. Conspiracy to commit murder. Drug offenses, weapons charges, July 27, 2001. Sentencing. U.S. District Judge James Moody delivered the verdict. 2 life sentences, plus 3 20-year terms, 2 10-year terms, 1 3-year term, $18,000 restitution. Bowman remained stoic, smiled at his attorney, walked out in orange, no family present, no outlaws. Federal prosecutors convicted 29 outlaws in the 1990s and early 2000s. Tampa became the prosecution epicenter, but the Outlaws survived. They rebuilt. they continued operations. March 3rd, 2019. Federal Medical Center, Butner, North Carolina. Harry Taco Bowman died of cancer, 69 years old, 18 years served. The legendary president was gone, but the empire remained. Today, the Outlaws still operate 441 chapters across 43 countries, over 5,000 members. Second largest outlaw club behind Hells Angels. The war with Hells Angels continues. 50 years of bloodshed, no end in sight. The Outlaws remain classified as organized crime by the Department of Justice, Criminal Intelligence Service Canada, and Europol. Drug trafficking, weapons smuggling, prostitution, murder, extortion. Recent arrests prove continued criminality. June 2025, Indiana. 6 outlaws arrested after viral video showed them beating a black man with racial slurs audible. September 2025, Tennessee. Outlaws member arrested with guns and drugs. The FBI, ATF, and DEA maintain constant surveillance. They execute raids. They flip members. They build RICO cases. In the shadowy world of Canadian crime, one name still sends chills down spines: Maurice "Mom" Boucher. This isn't just another story about a criminal, it's the jaw-dropping journey of a high school dropout who clawed his way out of poverty to become one of North America's most feared bikers. When you hear the name Maurice Boucher, it's hard not to think of violence and ruthlessness. As a full-patch member of the infamous Hells Angels motorcycle club, Boucher rose to become one of Canada's deadliest criminals. But how did a streetwise hustler transform into the mastermind behind a $100 million criminal empire? And what drove him to commit one of the most shocking crimes in Canadian history? The cold-blooded murders of 2 prison guards? That act of brutal defiance sent shockwaves across the nation. Boucher's reign of terror spanned nearly 2 decades, claiming over 160 lives during the bloody Quebec biker war of the 1990s. Under his leadership, the Hells Angels dominated 80% of Quebec's drug trade, raking in a staggering $111 million in just 8 months. Everyone knew Mom was a killer, and he loved that they knew it. For a while, he seemed completely untouchable. After being acquitted in his first trial, some even saw him as a twisted kind of folk hero. But karma has a funny way of catching up. In 2002, Boucher's empire came crashing down, culminating in the largest mass arrest of Hells Angels in history. 142 bikers taken down in a single day. It marked the dramatic fall of a man who once ruled with an iron fist. Even before his arrest in 1997, Boucher's name was infamous across the country. But prison didn't silence him. At one point, he was put on trial for ordering the murders of 2 prison guards, a chilling attempt to destabilize the justice system itself. This is the story of Maurice "Mom" Boucher, a tale of power, bloodshed, and the dark side of Canadian society. It's a story that makes you wonder about the true cost of outlaw justice. Maurice "Mom" Boucher's story starts in the tough streets of Cape de la Madeleine, Quebec, where he grew up surrounded by poverty and struggle. One of 8 kids, he learned early that life wouldn't be easy. Dropping out of school in grade 9, Maurice picked up odd jobs and followed his father into construction. But even then, he struggled to get by. Growing up in Montreal's rough Hochelaga Maisonneuve neighborhood, young Boucher quickly figured out that the rules didn't always work in your favor, so he started breaking them. By his teens, he was already well known to local cops, earning a reputation as a troublemaker. He also developed a drug habit, dabbling in hashish, LSD, and cocaine. To fuel his addiction, he turned to petty crime, which quickly escalated. In 1974, at just 20 years old, Boucher got his first major sentence, 40 months in prison for robbing a convenience store and making off with $138. Instead of being scared straight, prison only toughened him up. It was there that Boucher made connections with seasoned criminals who would later help him on his rise to power. By the early 1980s, Boucher joined the SS, a white supremacist biker gang. It was here he started to stand out, showing both leadership skills and a willingness to get his hands dirty. Montreal police officer Commander André Bouchard, who dealt with Boucher during this time, described him as muscle and a crazy expletive. someone constantly high, but always ready to throw down. Then, in 1986, Boucher made a life-changing move. He joined the Hells Angels in Montreal. His climb through the ranks was nothing short of rapid. He quickly proved his loyalty and ambition, reportedly securing his full-patch status on May 1, 1987, just hours after the murder of Martin Huneau, the leader of a rival gang called the Death Riders. Boucher's rise coincided with chaos within the Hells Angels. Later that year, Michel Sky Langlois, the president of the Canadian Hells Angels, fled to Morocco to escape a warrant related to the notorious Lennoxville massacre. This left a power vacuum in the organization, one that Boucher was more than ready to fill. Maurice Boucher's rise to power coincided with the Hells Angels, expanding deeper into the highly profitable drug trade. His sharp business instincts and brutal tactics quickly turned him into a major player within the organization's criminal empire. When leadership gaps appeared after the arrests following the Atlantic City massacre, Boucher stepped in, becoming president of the Montreal South chapter by late 1987. Recognizing the need to rebuild the Hells Angels' reputation, Boucher and his associate Walter began recruiting smaller biker gangs, offering them Hells Angels membership. By the early 1990s, Boucher was one of the most powerful bikers in Quebec, controlling a sprawling network of illegal activities, including cocaine trafficking and loan sharking. The real turning point came in 1994 when Salvatore Casita, a former ally and rival gang leader, was arrested. Boucher seized the opportunity to consolidate his power, taking bold steps to monopolize street-level drug dealing in Montreal and beyond. This move sparked the bloody Quebec biker war, cementing his reputation as one of Canada's most dangerous and influential criminals. As the war escalated, so did Boucher's influence. His commands carried absolute authority within the Hells Angels, often determining life or death for those in his circle. Known for his hands-on and unforgiving leadership style, Boucher was both feared and respected by allies and enemies alike. In January 1995, Boucher made a strategic move to further tighten his grip on power. He created a new Hells Angels chapter called the Nomads, an elite group of bikers who operated without geographic restrictions. Officially launched in June 1995, the Nomads were ruthless and unwavering in their mission to expand the Angels' drug operations. Under Boucher's direct command, they silenced anyone who got in their way, whether it was informants, journalists, or even law enforcement officers. Boucher, nicknamed Mom for his overbearing and controlling nature, used the Nomads to solidify his position at the top of Quebec's underworld. This elite unit gave him unparalleled freedom and power, making him nearly untouchable. But by 1997, Boucher was on the brink of making a fateful decision that would mark the beginning of his eventual downfall. Maurice Boucher's actions in the late 1990s solidified his reputation as one of Canada's most dangerous criminals, but also set the stage for his eventual downfall. In a move that shocked the nation, Boucher ordered the murders of 2 prison guards, Diane Levine and Pierre Rondeau, in a cold-blooded attempt to assert his dominance over the prison system and send a terrifying message to law enforcement. These brutal killings were a turning point, shaking Quebec's justice system to its core and proving just how far Boucher's influence stretched. Despite the heightened scrutiny that followed, Boucher continued to operate as if untouchable. He expanded his criminal empire while carefully dodging law enforcement, walking a razor-thin line between power and exposure. His reach extended even into the prison system, where he maintained a network of loyal followers who carried out his orders without question. By this time, Boucher's power within the Hells Angels had peaked. He wasn't just leading the Montreal chapter. He had become a key figure in the club's international operations. His ability to rake in huge profits through drug trafficking and other illegal activities made him a vital player in the Hells Angels global network. But as his empire grew, so did the determination of law enforcement to take him down. Police forces began building airtight cases, gathering evidence, and flipping members of his inner circle against him. The violent path Boucher had chosen was heading toward a collision with justice, one that would not only bring about his fall, but also shake the foundation of organized crime in Canada. Boucher's downfall marked the end of an era, forever altering the landscape of outlaw biker gangs and proving that even the most feared criminals are not beyond the reach of the law. The Quebec Biker War, raging from 1994 to 2002, with Maurice Boucher at its core, was a brutal chapter in Canadian history that left deep scars across the province. Over 8 years, the conflict claimed more than 160 lives, laying bare the vicious reality of outlaw biker culture. This unprecedented violence reshaped the landscape of organized crime in Quebec and left communities grappling with its devastating aftermath. While most victims of the war were rival bikers and criminals, not all were spared. Some of the darkest moments in the conflict etched the human toll into Quebec's collective memory. One of the most tragic incidents occurred on August 9th, 1995, when an 11-year-old boy, Daniel Desrochers, was killed by a car bomb meant for a gang member near his home in Montreal. Boucher's notoriety grew partly because much of the violence seemed to be confined to the criminal underworld, turning him into a twisted kind of folk hero for some. But for those who lived through it, the names of innocent victims remain impossible to forget. Prison guards Diane Lavigne and Pierre Rondeau were murdered in cold blood on Boucher's orders, and Yves Legros Vadeboncoeur, a father of two, was gunned down at a gas station after being mistaken for a biker. Everyday locations like parks, streets, and gas stations became battlegrounds as the violence spilled into public life.
Sicilians thank police as news emerges that they have finally arrested Matteo Denaro, Italy's most wanted man, picked up at a private hospital in Sicily's capital, Palermo, a boss of Cosa Nostra, the island's notorious mafia group.
The Mafia. It's a name that's both feared and fascinating, right? You've probably seen it in movies, heard about it in books, or even wondered how something so secretive and powerful got started. But have you ever asked yourself, where did the Mafia actually come from? How did it go from small groups in rural Sicily to becoming one of the most influential forces in the world? Picture it, small villages, vast lands owned by a few wealthy landowners, and a population of peasants struggling to survive. The government? Well, it wasn't much help. In fact, it was more interested in keeping the rich rich, leaving the poor to fend for themselves. Now, imagine this. You're a peasant living in rural Sicily. You don't have a lot of options. The landowners are pushing you around, and the police don't seem interested in helping. What do? In some cases, you turn to the Mafia. But hold on. At this point, it wasn't the slick, power-hungry criminal empire we know today. It started as a pretty simple idea: protection. It's important to note that, in the beginning, the word mafia didn't have the same connotations it carries today. It wasn't about organized crime on a massive scale, but more about survival. The local mafiosi were seen as protectors, the ones who could stand up to the rich landowners and corrupt officials. They weren't yet the fearsome figures of movies and TV shows, but they were already making a name for themselves as the only people who could actually help the little guy. The term mafia itself is a bit of a mystery with a few different theories. One popular one is that it comes from a Sicilian phrase, mia fia, which roughly translates to my faith or my protection. So, in a way, the mafia was like a dark underground insurance company. If you were in trouble, you paid for their protection, and in return, they kept your enemies away. Over time, the mafia evolved. It was no longer just a group of people helping out their neighbors. It became an organized force. They were collecting money, not just for protection, but for all sorts of activities. Things like smuggling, blackmail, and even managing crops and livestock for the landowners. They had a hand in all kinds of deals, and slowly, their power began to grow. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The Mafia didn't just stay in Sicily. While it was originally an island-based operation, it quickly spread across Italy. And it didn't take long before people outside of Sicily started to take notice. In fact, in the late 1800s, the Mafia started to get involved in some pretty significant political activity. They weren't just controlling the local economy, they were becoming part of the political system itself. Corruption, it was all part of the game. If a politician needed votes or favors, the Mafia was there, ready to help in exchange for a little something extra. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. The government tried to take action, and at times, the Mafia faced some heavy opposition. But because their influence had spread so far, it wasn't easy to get rid of them. The Mafia had embedded itself so deeply into Sicilian society that even the authorities were wary of crossing them. This connection between the Mafia and local politics only grew stronger over the next few decades. But here's the twist. As the mafia expanded and gained power, it started to shift from small-time protection rackets to something much darker. They were starting to get a taste of real power, and, as we know, power has a way of corrupting. While they were still offering protection, they were also starting to control larger chunks of the economy. It was no longer just about helping out a neighbor. Now, it was about managing entire industries and controlling territory. By the end of the 19th century, the mafia wasn't just an isolated phenomenon in Sicily. It was a force that was rapidly becoming intertwined with Italy's political and economic systems. And while it all started as a way for peasants to survive, it was becoming clear that the mafia was on its way to something much bigger. As the mafia's power grew in Sicily, it wasn't long before its reach stretched beyond Italy's shores. And that's where things get really interesting, because the mafia found a perfect storm of opportunity in the United States. The early 20th century was a time of major change. Immigration to the US was booming, and millions of Italians were arriving, desperate for a fresh start in a new world. Many of these immigrants came from Sicily, bringing with them their traditions, culture, and, of course, their ties to the mafia. The connection was natural. They were used to a system where the mafia offered protection and had control over local matters. So, when they arrived in America, they found themselves turning to the same networks for support. Now, the mafia wasn't exactly a welcome guest in the US at first, but then fate threw them a curveball. In 1920, Prohibition hit. The US government made alcohol illegal, thinking it would improve society. Big mistake. Rather than cutting down on drinking, Prohibition sparked an explosion in illegal alcohol production and distribution. And who better to fill that void than the mafia? They had the networks, the connections, and the drive to make big money. And that's exactly what they did. The mafia's influence in the US during Prohibition wasn't just a flash in the pan. It was the start of a full-scale, nationwide operation. They didn't just bootleg alcohol. They ran illegal distilleries, supplied speakeasies, and controlled the entire underground alcohol trade. Names like Al Capone and Lucky Luciano became legends, and with good reason. These men built entire empires, not just on liquor, but on everything from gambling to prostitution, and even narcotics. But while they were making huge amounts of money, the mafia wasn't just about the crime. It was about power, too. In many ways, they became so influential that they were above the law. Local politicians, police officers, and even judges could be bought off, making it nearly impossible for the authorities to take them down. The mafia was deeply embedded in American society, and they used that position to grow their influence. It wasn't just the US that was feeling the mafia's presence. Back in Italy, their influence was still going strong. In fact, the mafia became so powerful that it was influencing major political decisions and shaping the country's economic future. But even with their power in Italy, the mafia's operation in America was growing at a terrifying rate. And let's not forget the families. While the mafia was expanding, it was also becoming more organized. In Sicily, it was all about family loyalty. But in America, things took on a whole new level. Mafia families started to build bigger, more sophisticated operations, with bosses overseeing entire networks of criminals and businesses. The Five Families of New York, Gambino, Genovese, Lucchese, Bonanno, and Colombo, became some of the most powerful organizations in the country, each with its own territory, its own set of rules, and its own ways of doing business. But it wasn't just about crime, it was about control. The mafia wanted to dominate every aspect of society. They infiltrated industries like construction, trucking, and even garbage collection. They had their hands in everything, and no one was really able to stop them. And as they grew more powerful, they began to spread their influence across the globe. From Cuba to Canada, the mafia was everywhere, building a worldwide network of crime that was hard to beat.
But who are the powerful Mexican drug cartels?
Mexico's cartels are famous for being brutal and having a grip on power that's hard to break. But things really got crazy when two Hells Angels bikers dared to step into their territory. And as you can imagine, the fallout wasn't pretty. So, what happens when the Hells Angels face off against the Mexican cartels? A showdown between two of the toughest criminal groups on the planet. The Hells Angels, with their trademark leather jackets and roaring motorbikes, have built an empire based on a mix of intimidation and strict rules. But even these tough bikers know to be cautious when it comes to the cartels. The Hells Angels like to show force, but the cartels? They're known for their sheer jaw-dropping brutality. And that's a whole different level. This clash of titans has turned North America's underworld into a ticking time bomb, where old-school muscle meets cold, ruthless violence. While the Hells Angels have a big presence in 56 countries, they've quickly learned that their usual tough guy tactics don't hold up when you're dealing with cartels that treat entire cities like war zones. The cartels have an army of ex-soldiers, including Mexican special forces and American veterans, lured by huge paychecks and the high life. They're armed to the teeth with everything from machine guns to drones and even anti-aircraft weapons. This makes Mexico's criminal scene unlike anything the world's ever seen before. The real kicker here is that these two groups couldn't be more different in how they operate. The Hells Angels, for all their reputation, prefer to stay low-key, avoiding violence that could attract too much attention from the cops. The cartels, on the other hand, don't hold back. Their massive profits fuel not just their operations, but also shockingly violent displays that even the toughest bikers find unsettling when business between them goes sour. It's not often that the Hells Angels get to call the shots. The cartels? Well, they're a different beast. They're known for using overwhelming force and not giving a second thought to civilian lives. And that's shifted the power dynamic in the criminal world. Now, even the most notorious biker gangs have to think twice before stepping on their turf. And it's not just theory. This brutal power shift is written in blood. In 2009, the usually idyllic tourist spot of Puerto Vallarta became the scene of a horrifying reminder of what happens when things go sideways between the cartels and bikers. Two Canadian guys, G. Jordan Douglas Kendall and Jeffrey Ronald Ivan, were having a typical night out in the lively city when things took a deadly turn. The pair was hanging out outside their condo in the tourist area when suddenly gunshots shattered the calm of a September evening. Witnesses say they saw a single gunman walk up to the men and, without warning, start shooting. Kendall was hit several times and dropped to the ground. Ivan, trying to make a run for it, bolted toward the pool area, but the gunman chased after him, still firing. Just when you thought it couldn't get worse, two more shooters showed up, finishing the job. They stood over the bleeding men, firing more shots to make sure there was no chance of survival. The gunfire echoed into the night, sending both tourists and locals scrambling for cover. By the time everything was quiet again, Kendall and Ivan were dead, their bodies covered in bullet holes. When the police started digging into what had happened, they quickly realized that Kendall and Ivan weren't just any tourists. They were Hells Angels members. The news of their brutal deaths sent shockwaves through the biker world and the authorities on both sides of the border. The savage attack, along with how bold the killers were, made many believe that this wasn't just a random act of violence. It was part of the ongoing war between the Hells Angels and the Mexican cartels. The Hells Angels and the cartels had been rivals for years, each trying to control the massive drug trade flowing across the border. But it wasn't just about beefs between gangs. Things got deadly when someone played the dangerous role of being the middleman. Kendall and Ivan's brutal deaths weren't personal. They were business. And in the shady world of drug dealing, being the go-between for two massive criminal empires is one of the riskiest jobs you can have. These middlemen operate in the shadows, making deals in secret hotel rooms, using encrypted phones, and juggling complicated transactions between groups that barely trust each other. They're the ones who do the dirty work, face-to-face negotiations, translating between different criminal cultures, and, most importantly, taking the heat when things go wrong. Kendall and Ivan were caught up in this dangerous game. They played their part as intermediaries until their lives were cut short by cartel gunfire. To pull off this high-stakes job, you need a unique set of skills: street credibility to command respect, negotiation skills to get the deal done, and most importantly, the ability to keep your cool when tensions run high. These middlemen also have to understand the ins and outs of different criminal organizations. They need to know when to bow down to a cartel boss, while still holding on to the pride that comes with being a Hells Angel. They have to figure out what topics are off limits and recognize the subtle signs that things are about to go south. When investigators dug into the aftermath, they uncovered a tangled web of deals and connections. Kendall and Ivan had been walking this tightrope for nearly 3 years, facilitating everything from drug shipments to arranging protection and making sure rival criminal factions got along, at least on the surface. Their phones, which were found at the crime scene, were filled with encrypted messages. These messages suggested that they were deep into negotiations for a massive cocaine shipment worth about $30 million. For the Hells Angels, playing middleman was a calculated risk, but a risky one that ultimately ended in tragedy. The Hells Angels made sure there were a few layers between their leadership and their cartel dealings. They kept things separated by using trusted middlemen like Kendall and Ivan, who only knew bits and pieces of the bigger picture. These intermediaries would meet in quiet spots, places like Puerto Vallarta, Cancun, or Acapulco, where no one would notice them. The whole idea was to fly under the radar. But this strategy put a lot of pressure on guys like Kendall and Ivan. They had to walk a fine line. They needed to be tough enough to earn the cartel's respect, but also humble enough not to step on anyone's toes. They carried burner phones, knew secret codes by heart, and followed tight security rules. One wrong word or a single misread gesture could set everything off and lead to violence. The cartels, on the other hand, were all about cold, hard business. Their intermediaries had to follow a strict, unwritten code. Don't haggle over prices, don't question how things are done, and never, ever try to pit rival cartels against each other. When it came to cartel turf wars, this job could be deadly. You could end up marked for death just for accidentally dealing with the wrong faction. Before their deaths, Kendall and Ivan had started to feel the heat. They'd noticed things changing, more surveillance, unfamiliar faces showing up at their usual meetups, and their cartel contacts acting a little off. But the Hells Angels are all about structure and hierarchy. They couldn't just step away from their duties without facing serious consequences from their own club. So even as things started to feel dangerous, Kendall and Ivan couldn't just walk away, and no one really knows exactly what went down in the days before their murders. The mystery of how and why they died still lingers. Although Kendall and Ivan's bodies were found quickly, the truth about their murders is still lost in time. Years have passed since that brutal night in Puerto Vallarta, but the case still lingers as a haunting mystery in criminal history. Despite the hard work of investigators on both sides of the border, the killers' identities remain a mystery, and the motive behind the savage attack is still up for speculation. Right after the murders, authorities scrambled to figure out what happened. They interviewed witnesses, gathered evidence, and chased down leads. But the investigation quickly hit a dead end. It was like the killers had vanished into thin air, leaving no clues to their identity or connection to the Mexican cartels. One of the most puzzling things about the case was that there was no clear link between Kendall and Ivan's deaths and any specific cartel. Everyone believed they were working as middlemen between the Hells Angels and the cartels, but there was no solid proof connecting their murders to a particular criminal group. This lack of a clear motive only made the case even more mysterious. Were Kendall and Ivan killed because of a turf war between rival cartels? Or had they somehow upset their criminal partners, maybe skimming profits or messing up a drug shipment? Or was there something even darker behind their brutal deaths? Adding to the mystery, Ivan was found carrying a gun when he was killed, raising questions about whether they were expecting trouble. Had they gotten tangled up in something even more dangerous than just a drug deal gone wrong? As the years went by, the investigation cooled off, and the chance of ever solving the case became slimmer. Kendall and Ivan's families are left to face the heartbreaking truth that they might never know the full story behind their deaths. Their murders serve as a grim reminder of the harsh realities of the drug trade and the deadly risks faced by those who try to navigate the dangerous world between the Hells Angels and the Mexican cartels. A highway straight to hell. Kendall and Ivan's deaths were a big moment for the Hells Angels, but not the end of the road. The club just kept going, and business was booming. They'd built something too valuable to let a couple of murders slow them down. With chapters spread all over the world, the Hells Angels had earned a reputation as one of the most powerful and influential criminal organizations ever. At the heart of their operations, a web of complicated alliances and partnerships with other criminal groups. One of the most important was their connection to the powerful Cali cartel, one of the biggest drug trafficking organizations in the world. Based in Mexico, the Cali cartel is responsible for producing and distributing huge amounts of cocaine, heroin, meth, and marijuana. With a sprawling smuggling network and a willingness to use violence to protect their territory, they've become a major player in the global drug trade. For the Hells Angels, partnering with the Cali cartel meant tapping into a steady stream of top-quality drugs, which they could then distribute across their own network. In Canada, particularly in Ontario, the Hells Angels have built a stronghold. Ontario's location near the US border, with its well-connected highways, makes it a perfect hub for drug trafficking. The club has used this strategic position to their advantage, moving drugs between Canada and the US, as well as using trucking routes to smuggle their product across the country, hidden among legitimate cargo. The size of their operation is staggering. Law enforcement estimates that the Hells Angels are behind the smuggling of millions of dollars worth of drugs into Canada each year. They've also been connected to drug trafficking operations in Europe, Australia, and beyond. But with all this power and money comes serious risk. The Hells Angels have ended up in the crosshairs of law enforcement agencies around the world who are determined to take them down. Law enforcement agencies around the world have made it a top priority to disrupt the Hells Angels operations and bring their members to justice. In recent years, the club's drug trafficking activities have taken a hit, thanks to a series of high-profile busts and investigations. In 2019, for example, police in Ontario arrested 28 people and seized millions of dollars worth of drugs, weapons, and cash as part of a major investigation into the club's operations. But to truly understand how the Hells Angels went from being bikers to international drug lords, we need to talk about Jimmy Coro. This is where things really started to shift. In the early hours of a chilly autumn morning, Coro's empire began to crumble. A convoy of heavily armed police officers surrounded his sprawling mansion in Montreal. Their target, the man known in the criminal world as the King of Pot. Coro, a French-Canadian, had built a massive empire off the illegal drug trade. His network of grow houses, smuggling routes, and distribution channels stretched all the way from Quebec's lush forests to Mexico's sun-soaked beaches. At the core of Coro's empire was his strategic alliance with the Hells Angels. This partnership would turn out to be a game changer, boosting the Hells Angels' presence in international drug trafficking. The club had already been under the radar of law enforcement, but their connection to Coro's operation brought them into the spotlight. They became a key target for multiple agencies, including the DEA, FBI, and Interpol. The Hells Angels didn't just provide muscle for Coro, they gave him a sophisticated distribution network that stretched across North America. Their involvement helped turn what might have been a local operation into an international powerhouse. This partnership marked a huge shift for the Hells Angels, taking them from being a motorcycle club into major players in a global drug trafficking syndicate. As Coro expanded his reach, making deals with the Cali cartel and the Rudo crime family, the Hells Angels' role grew more and more significant. Prominent law enforcement agencies began to notice something unusual. There was unprecedented cooperation between these normally separate criminal groups, with the Hells Angels playing a key role as intermediaries. The Rudo family, who controlled the port of Montreal and had a network of corrupt officials, paired perfectly with the Hells Angels, whose distribution capabilities stretched across continents. This three-way partnership created an unstoppable trafficking operation that took years for law enforcement to break through. The investigation into Coro's empire led to a major increase in surveillance on Hells Angels chapters across North America. Police departments and federal agencies started sharing intelligence about the club's activities like never before, which led to numerous high-profile arrests and raids on clubhouses. In 2012, the DEA finally caught up with Coro and extradited him to New York. His trial exposed the complex relationships between these criminal groups. Prosecutors carefully laid out how the Hells Angels had gone from a motorcycle club to sophisticated partners in a billion-dollar criminal empire. The testimony in that trial later helped support dozens of investigations into Hells Angels chapters across North America. Coro's 27-year sentence wasn't just the end of his reign. It also triggered a wave of law enforcement actions against his criminal partners. The Hells Angels, in particular, were now facing unprecedented pressure from law enforcement, with their ties to Coro's empire giving authorities new legal tools to go after them. Meanwhile, the ATF had its own daring mission, infiltrating the Hells Angels from within. If Coro's case exposed how sophisticated the Hells Angels had become, what happened in Arizona revealed their biggest weakness. Deep in the desert, one undercover agent showed that even the most feared motorcycle club had their blind spots. It was 2002, and Operation Black Biscuit was about to go down as one of the most daring undercover operations in U.S. law enforcement history. The ATF had set its sights on the Hells Angels, a notorious gang known for their involvement in crime. For years, they'd operated unchecked, using their fearsome reputation and network to build an empire of drugs, weapons, and violence. Operation Black Biscuit was the ATF's boldest move yet, a mission to infiltrate the heart of the Hells Angels, specifically their Arizona chapter. The plan was risky, requiring someone who could fully blend in with the biker world, someone who could handle the pressure and danger of living the life of a Hells Angel without blowing their cover. Jay Dobbins, an ex-college football player with a strong jaw and military buzz cut, wasn't your typical undercover agent, but his mix of toughness, brains, and natural charisma made him the perfect fit for the job. His athletic background and intensity helped him earn the respect of the bikers. For almost 2 years, Dobbins lived the Hells Angels lifestyle. He went to crazy parties filled with drugs and booze, got into brutal fights, and even rode alongside some of the country's most notorious criminals. The deeper he got, the more dangerous it became, but Dobbins kept his focus, gathering crucial evidence to take down some of the club's most powerful members. The operation required a delicate balance. Dobbins had to be criminal enough to be convincing, but not cross the line and lose his law enforcement values. It was a risky game, and he had to stay sharp at all times. The Hells Angels were always on the lookout for signs of betrayal, and trust me, they didn't take kindly to infiltrators. One wrong move, one slip-up, and Dobbins' cover could be blown, putting his life on the line. The Hells Angels' brutal history of dealing with suspected informants was a constant shadow over him, but Dobbins was an expert at what he did. He blended into the rough world of the bikers, adopting their language, their clothes, and their way of life. His commitment to his role was absolute. He ate, lived, and breathed the biker lifestyle. He knew that even the smallest crack in his facade could cost him everything. Over the 2 years he spent infiltrating the Hells Angels, Dobbins managed to gather an incredible amount of evidence. He documented their drug trafficking and weapons smuggling operations in intricate detail. The information he collected gave law enforcement a rare, deep insight into the inner workings of the infamous club. When Operation Black Biscuit finally came to a head, the ATF was ready. In a series of coordinated raids across the country, they arrested dozens of high-ranking Hells Angels members, including the club's notorious leader, Ralph "Sonny" Barger. The operation had struck at the very core of the organization, exposing its vulnerabilities and shattering its invincible image. The arrests sent shockwaves through the criminal world. For the first time, the Hells Angels had been outsmarted by law enforcement. Their carefully built empire of crime and violence began to crumble. In 2009, Dobbins shared his incredible journey in the New York Times best-selling memoir, No Angel. My harrowing undercover journey to the inner circle of the Hells Angels. The book gave readers an unprecedented look into the world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, along with the psychological toll of living a double life. The Hells Angels' most dangerous evolution was unfolding far beyond Arizona's desert. Their alliance with El Chapo's empire exposed just how far the motorcycle club had strayed from its outlaw roots. In the shadowy world of international drug trafficking, perhaps no partnership was more unsettling or strange than the one between the Hells Angels and El Chapo's notorious Sinaloa cartel. This collaboration blurred the lines between street gangs and global crime syndicates. The story of this unholy alliance began to surface in a courtroom in New York City, where El Chapo stood trial for charges of drug trafficking and money laundering. As the trial progressed, shocking revelations emerged, painting a picture of a criminal underworld where borders and organizational boundaries were meaningless in the face of the insatiable demand for illegal drugs. One of the most explosive moments came when a government witness, Stephen T., a former associate of El Chapo, testified about a meeting between the Sinaloa cartel and a group of Canadian Hells Angels. According to T., the purpose of the meeting was to arrange a hit on a rival drug dealer, someone who had crossed the cartel and needed to be eliminated. This revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom and beyond, as the idea of two of the world's most infamous criminal organizations working together to execute a murder seemed almost unimaginable. As more details emerged, it became clear that this alliance wasn't a coincidence but a meticulously cultivated relationship that had been developing for years. For the Sinaloa cartel, the Hells Angels were a valuable ally in the drug trade. With their history of violence and a vast network of contacts stretching across North America and beyond, the Hells Angels represented a group that could help the cartel expand its operations, tap into new markets, and eliminate rivals. For the Hells Angels, the partnership with the Sinaloa cartel offered access to a steady supply of high-quality drugs and a formidable ally in the criminal underworld. It was a relationship full of promise, but also fraught with peril, as the Hells Angels soon realized that crossing the cartel could have deadly consequences. As El Chapo's trial unfolded, the full extent of his criminal empire became apparent. This was a man who had constructed an immense network of corruption and violence, extending from the streets of Mexico all the way to the boardrooms of Wall Street. He had used his wealth and power to manipulate governments and armies, bending them to his will. Yet, as El Chapo's empire was exposed in a New York courtroom, the shadow of Kendall and Yvonne's murders still loomed over the Hells Angels. Their deaths had taught the motorcycle club a brutal lesson about cartel partnerships. The message was clear: cross the cartels at your own peril. Even as the Hells Angels mourned their loss, they knew they couldn't afford to show weakness against such a powerful and ruthless enemy. For the Hells Angels, the conflict with the cartels had always been a dangerous game, a high-stakes gamble offering great rewards, but also posing immense risks. The club had long relied on its reputation as one of the most feared and influential criminal organizations in the world to shield itself from the worst of the cartel's wrath. But now, that reputation was in question. In the years following Kendall and Ivan's deaths, the Hells Angels found themselves increasingly drawn into the orbit of the Mexican cartels as they sought to maintain their dominance in the lucrative drug trade. They formed new alliances and struck fresh deals, careful to avoid the kind of direct confrontation that had claimed their members' lives. But even as they navigated this perilous new landscape, the Hells Angels couldn't escape the long shadow cast by the cartels in Canada and beyond. The threat of cartel violence was always looming, a stark reminder of the high price to pay for crossing the wrong people. The impact of this conflict rippled far beyond the Hells Angels. In Mexico, the cartel's iron grip on power only tightened in the years that followed, as they expanded their operations and solidified control over vast territories. Despite the efforts of the Mexican government and international law enforcement agencies, the cartels proved to be an indomitable force, their power and influence growing with each passing year. They continued to corrupt politicians and police, infiltrate legitimate businesses, and spread fear and violence wherever they went. As the bodies piled up and the drugs flowed endlessly, it became increasingly clear that the war between the Hells Angels and the Mexican cartels was more than just a struggle between two criminal organizations. It was a microcosm of a much larger battle, a fight for the soul of a nation and a region consumed by the drug trade. In this war, there is no clear victor, no decisive battle to determine the fate of Mexico or the criminal underworld. Instead, there are only the echoes of violence, the never-ending cycle of death and destruction that has become the hallmark of the drug trade. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you in the next one.